What if the attack on Pearl Harbor wasn't the final objective? What if it was just the first step in a much grander, much more terrifying plan? Imagine a world where the Imperial Japanese Navy didn't turn back after December 7, 1941, but instead pushed forward their target, the American mainland itself. It sounds like something from a novel, right? But how close did this alternate history come to being our reality? Let's dive into one of the most chilling what-ifs of World War II. To even consider an invasion, Japan would have needed a different outcome at a key battle, the Battle of Midway. In our timeline, the U.S. Navy scored a decisive victory, sinking 4 of Japan's best aircraft carriers and crippling their naval power for the rest of the war. But in this alternate scenario, let's say Japan wins. They managed to sink the American carriers, the Yorktown, the Enterprise, and the Hornet, and establish dominance over the Central Pacific. With the U.S. Pacific Fleet in tatters, Japan's first move wouldn't be a full-scale landing on California. That's a logistical nightmare. Instead, they'd likely target a closer, more strategic prize, Hawaii. Without a strong naval presence to defend it, the islands would be incredibly vulnerable. The U.S. forces stationed there would put up a fierce fight, but they'd be cut off, isolated, and facing the full might of the victorious Japanese fleet. The fall of Hawaii would be a devastating blow to American morale and a strategic catastrophe, giving Japan a forward base thousands of miles closer to the U.S. coast. From their new base in Hawaii, the Japanese military could begin launching attacks on the West Coast. Think submarine raids on shipping lanes from Seattle to San Diego, disrupting supply lines and causing widespread panic. They could even launch bombing raids using long-range aircraft. The iconic Hollywood sign might find itself in the crosshairs. Cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles would be in a constant state of alert, with air raid sirens becoming a part of daily life. The psychological impact on the American public would be immense. The war, which once felt an ocean away, would now be right on their doorstep. But could they actually land troops? This is where the plan gets incredibly difficult for Japan. Even with naval superiority, crossing the vast Pacific with hundreds of thousands of soldiers and keeping them supplied is a monumental task. The U.S. still had its industrial might, which was just kicking into high gear. The most plausible target for an initial landing wouldn't be a heavily populated city, but a more remote location. Perhaps somewhere in Oregon or Northern California, where they could seize a port and attempt to build a beachhead. Imagine Japanese soldiers landing on American soil. The reaction would be one of absolute unified fury. The slogan, "Remember Pearl Harbor," would take on a whole new, more visceral meaning. Every able-bodied American on the West Coast would become a potential defender. You'd see civilian militias forming, hunters using their own rifles to defend their towns. The fighting would be brutal, street by street, forest by forest. The logistical strain on Japan would be enormous. Every bullet, every grain of rice for their invading army would have to cross thousands of miles of hostile ocean. Meanwhile, what's happening in the rest of the world? With the U.S. desperately fighting a defensive war on its own territory, its ability to support the Allies in Europe would be severely hampered. The Lend-Lease program, which supplied Britain and the Soviet Union with vital war materials, would slow to a trickle. A world where the Axis powers control both Europe and Asia becomes a terrifyingly real possibility. Back in the States, the American industrial machine would be working 24/7, but now with a singular focus: repelling the invaders. The entire country would mobilize on a scale never before seen. Instead of shipping tanks to Europe, they'd be rolling down highways toward the West Coast. New shipyards, aircraft factories, and munitions plants would spring up across the heartland. America's greatest strength wasn't just its soldiers, but its ability to produce and innovate at an unbelievable rate. This is where the Japanese invasion plan ultimately crumbles. Even if they secured a foothold, they could never match America's industrial output or manpower. The U.S. population in the 1940s was nearly double that of Japan's. The Japanese military planners knew this. Admiral Yamamoto himself famously said, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." An invasion of the mainland would turn that sleeping giant into an enraged behemoth. The war on American soil would be long and bloody, but the outcome is almost certain. The Japanese supply lines would eventually be cut, their forces surrounded and worn down. The U.S. would leverage its vast resources to push the invaders back into the sea. But the cost would be staggering. American cities on the West Coast would be scarred by battle, and the number of casualties, both military and civilian, would be horrifying. In the end, this alternate timeline serves as a stark reminder of how history can turn on a single battle. While a full-scale Japanese invasion of the U.S. was highly improbable, the threat was real enough to shape American strategy and fuel the nation's resolve. It highlights the incredible logistical challenges of modern warfare and the immense power of a unified and industrialized nation defending its homeland. The world we live in was truly forged in the fires of these critical moments. What do you think? Could Japan have pulled it off under different circumstances? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching this journey into an alternate past. If you enjoy exploring historical what-ifs, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.